The Reds finished a series with the Mariners. It was stinky, but it in no way impedes my fervor for the Reds this season.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Reds with myself, Jeff Carr. I am a lifelong Cincinnati Reds fan that has gone through far worse than a 9-9 start to begin the season, and I've turned an addiction to this team and to information for you. I want to thank you for making Locked On Reds part of your day. Locked On Reds is, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team, your Cincinnati Reds, every single day, through thick, through thin, through wins, through losses, through winning streaks, through losing streaks. We're here with you every single day. And if you're an everydayer, you already knew that, and thank you for being an everydayer. You are a huge part of what makes this show go. Coming up on today's Locked On Reds podcast, I kind of want to get, and this will be later on in the show, but I kind of want to get a wellness check on where you're at just 18 games into the season. Let me know in the comments section right now what you're thinking about where the Reds are at in this moment in time. We're also going to get into Jonathan India and why his performances to this point have been weird, but he's right where he should be. And I want to start first and foremost with why I'm not worried one bit. Before we get into all of that, I want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it's a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. Join your friends and download Monopoly Go now from free on the App Store or Google Play Store. All right, 18 games in. Reds are 9-9. It's about where I figure they'd probably be at this point. Look, we said that through the first 2 months of the season, if the Reds finish May at 500, they're in the perfect position to win this division. What have you seen through this 9-9 start to make you believe that they are further away than they possibly could have imagined in February? They have done some good things. They've done some bad things. I think sweeping the Chicago White Sox may have put thoughts in our heads that they're perfect. They're not. Things have not come together just yet. Certain things are working, certain things are not. But I want to do this because in the David Bell era, it's been marked that this team doesn't start very fast. 9-9 isn't a bad start. In fact, 9-9 is the same. It's tied for the best start in the David Bell era. Let that sink in for a minute. His first season, 2019, the first 18 games, they started 6-12. 2020, shortened season, weird circumstances, but first 18 games, they were 8-10. 2021, when they look like they might put it together, they look like they might be a playoff team, didn't ultimately end up being that way, but had a winning record. They started off the year 9-9 in their first 18 games, really where they are at right now. 2022 was that horrible start on their way to 3-22. Their first 18 games, they were 3-15. It's crazy to think they still had 7 more losses to go after that. Ugh. And then in 2023, they began the season 7-11. And now the Reds in 2024, based on what we've said, based on the talent that's on this team, are better than the 2023 team. They're better than 2022. They're better than 2020. They're better than 2019. They're probably better than 2021, but the records are the same. I'd say talent-wise, they are better. So when you look at all of that, what's changed? What do we know after 18 games? Not much. We know that Spencer Steer is a stabilizing force in the middle of this order, this batting order. Kind of already knew that coming into the season, but he's proved it so far. And I don't think it's going to change very much. Ellie can take over a game, but he's still going to make a mistake here and there, and we're going to wonder if the mistake that he made cost them that particular game. But he is showing signs of getting it at the plate. He uncorked a huge home run off of Bryce Miller, the only hit of the game in the series finale that ended up being the sweep for the Reds. But in the second game, in the 9th inning, he came up with 2 outs, 2 on, and he had a full count against him. You know what a guy who's 22 years old usually does in that kind of case? He swings out of his shoes at the very next pitch he sees. Ellie didn't. Ellie looked. Ellie took a walk. Shows maturity. Did we want him to hit a bomb? Did we want him to hit a line drive to hopefully get the game tied or something like that? Sure. And I'm sure he wanted to do that. But he knew with the pitch that was coming to the plate, he couldn't. This is something that we were looking for in him. Evolution. How does his game change? How does his game grow? That's a good growth point. But we know who Ellie is right now. And the Reds need to score. We know this. The Reds need to score at least 4 runs to win on a consistent basis. This team isn't going to win too many 2-1 games. It's definitely not going to win too many 1-0 games. Probably not going to win too many 3-2 games. They got to get to 4. If they get to 4, they got a good shot. And one thing that we know unequivocally is that they miss T.J. Friedl, Matt McClain, and Noelvi Marte. Santiago Espinal hasn't been all that great. But this team was not supposed to have to count on a guy like Santiago Espinal. This team was supposed to be counting on Noelvi Marte, and he kind of messed that up. This team wasn't really supposed to count on Jonathan India to be their everyday second baseman. Matt McClain was supposed to be that guy. And hopefully, if all reports are true, he'll come back in August, and he'll be that guy. But the Reds need to get to that point first. And then T.J. Friedl was supposed to be this team's everyday center fielder. Most teams that are missing their everyday center fielder and their everyday second baseman have a lethargic lineup. Not the Reds. They've been one of the best in the league. And 9-9 is frustrating because it feels like they could have been at least over 500. If they won one game in Seattle, they would be. But it does not change my position that I think this is a playoff team. I think this team can compete for the NL Central. Nothing has changed. In fact, it was Sparky Anderson who once said, just play 500 ball and then hit a couple of good streaks. And I'm paraphrasing. I don't know the exact quote there. But, play 500 ball and hit a good winning streak and you're golden. That's what makes a playoff team. That's what makes a good team. That's all this team needs to do. And they've got the talent to put together a long streak. Just because they lose 3 games to Seattle in April, there's people that are ready to jump off the bandwagon. And you know what? If that's you, whatever. I'm not here to tell you whether or not you should. I'm just going to tell you that I ain't even thinking about it right now. Of course, I do a daily podcast about the team. I'm never going to jump off any sort of bandwagon because I'm crazy. But that being said, there's no reason. This team has given me no reason to doubt the position I think they will be in October. Coming up next, I'm going to dive into the enigma that is Jonathan India. Today's episode is brought to you in part by Policygenius. Policygenius is the smarter way to buy insurance. Their proprietary technology makes it easy to compare personalized quotes and policies from top-rated insurers side by side. Policygenius' team of licensed experts is here to answer questions, handle paperwork, and help you make decisions with confidence. They work for you, not for the insurance companies. From exploring coverage options to making policy adjustments as your life changes, Policygenius is your advocate at every step. And Policygenius is committed to your information remaining secure. Your security is their priority. They use industry-leading security practices to help keep your information safe. Check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com/LockedOnMLB or click the link in the description of today's episode and get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/LockedOn. YouTube.com/LockedOn MLB. All right, everyone, I need you to listen up. And it's a huge announcement, promise you. That Steve yesterday said that he was on top of the leaderboards. Well, I'm back on top, baby, because I've been grinding. I've been monitoring these leaderboards, and I'm finally number one again. That's right. Obviously, I'm talking about the hit mobile game Monopoly Go. You've probably heard of it. It's been downloaded over 100 million times. In fact, 150 million times. It's a great mobile twist on the classic Monopoly game, and you can play anywhere, anytime. You explore hundreds of Monopoly boards from Las Vegas to Camelot to the moon, all while raking in a huge fortune. Charge rent on iconic properties just like in Monopoly, with your friends being the ones that pay you cash out of their fortune. Plus, you can raid their fortune by going on bank heists or even knocking down their landmarks. There's so much fun to be had on this game, but my favorite part is the leaderboards, where you can see who's a Monopoly tycoon and who's gone bankrupt. So go get yourself on the charts. Download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or the Google Play. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Do you have to turn down the volume with all the shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you 24/7 news and analysis and opinions, and it's on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team, every day. And speaking of every day, shout out to our everydayers. Thanks for being a part of the show. For our everydayers out there, coming up on the next Locked On Reds podcast, we're going to be live on Friday afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, getting you ready for the Reds and Angels series and how the Reds will get back to being an over 500 ball club. But first, before we get to all of that tomorrow, we're talking about why I'm not worried. And a guy I'm not worried about, a player specifically that I'm not worried about, is Jonathan India. Don't look at the batting average when it comes to Jonathan India, because you're going to see that a $159 and say, he ain't good. We told you this in the past, and everydayers will know, if you look at the batting average and you think you know everything about a player, you don't. And Jonathan India is a specific example of this, because he's headed for a breakout, and he's currently in the perfect spot for him in the batting order. And based on his quality of contact and the fact that his batting average on balls in play is incredibly low right now. I mean, he's got a 217 batting average on balls in play. League average is 299. Means he's getting cheated out of a lot there. India's expected batting average, according to Baseball Savant, is actually 298. Think if he had that right now. Think if he had anything close to that right now. If he's batting 270, nobody'd be worried about him. And yeah, I know he just had a bunch of strikeouts looking in the final game of the series with the Mariners, but his chase rate is one of the best in baseball. And so is his walk rate. Dude is doing a good job of getting on base, not getting cheated. That sounds like a leadoff hitter to me. Jonathan India has been strange this year because, typically we see line drives, we see the power. We saw him swing a lot this past year. In fact, he has the lowest swing rate of any player in Major League Baseball. He's only swinging. He swings at less than 30. It's like 32.7% of pitches that he sees. So less than a third of the pitches he sees, he swings at. Some may say that might be a weakness. That might be a fatal flaw. I disagree. I think that he's downloading. I think that he's going to start keying in on his pitch. This is something that Joey Votto did every single year of his career. He turned out pretty good. Now, I'm not saying that Jonathan India is Joey Votto. The power isn't quite there. In fact, even, Baseball Savant loves, his expected batting average, doesn't love his expected slugging. Baseball Savant's expected slugging for Jonathan India is like 390. That's nothing crazy, but 298 expected batting average, which means it's going to come up here soon. He's getting unlucky. He's going to start hitting the ball, which means his on-base percentage, that even though he's got a $159 batting average, it's more than double to his on-base percentage. Still getting on base almost 32% of the time. Usually a guy hitting a $150 is getting on base like 28%, 27% of the time. Like, Jonathan India is going to be okay. And here's a really deep dive into this. And I wanted to kind of get into the weeds on Jonathan India a little bit in this segment, because as the leadoff man, you need to do a couple of things. You need to set the table by getting on base, being there for the big boppers coming up behind you so you can come around to score. But you also need to be a disruptor to the pitcher. TJ Friedl does this phenomenally well in so many different ways. And Jonathan India has been watching that. Jonathan India is doing it in a different way. He is looking at a ton of pitches. In fact, in Major League Baseball, there's only one player that has seen an average number of pitches per plate appearance higher than Jonathan India. Jonathan India's average pitches per plate appearance is 4.61. Only Ian Happ, only Ian Happ has seen more, and he's at 4.63. Jonathan India is that close to being the best in baseball when it comes to making a pitcher work. And here's another thing it's really interesting, because right now what's keeping his batting average and his production at the plate down is his patience. He's almost too patient, because right now 41% of the strikes that he accrues are on strikes looking. He watches them go by. Now, some might say that's a weakness. I still think that patience is a virtue in this case, right? I think that this is something that he is building up toward. He is looking at the pitches. He's getting a feel for how things are breaking, how things are falling, what umpires are calling. And honestly, Bryce Miller was just absolutely dotting his fastball in the lower part of the zone on Wednesday. And India was taking all of those pitches, and they were getting called for strikes, because they were strikes. It wasn't as if there were a couple times where Jonathan India looked like he's like, I don't think that was a strike. Clearly by K-zone it was. It was just really good pitches from Bryce Miller. He had a very good day. So did every Mariners pitcher that touched the rubber last night. It was a very good day for them. But that's not to say that what is happening to India right now is bad. All of the peripheral numbers, all of the underlying numbers that lead to guys having good performances are saying, get ready. Jonathan India is about to break out. And what he is doing right now does not deter me in any way from thinking that he should even be moved down in the order. I know we said this with Christian Encarnacion Strand and with Jeimer Candelario. They've done that with Candelario. They didn't do it with Christian Encarnacion Strand, even to a point when David Bell decides to give him a day off. They just put Stuart Fairchild in CES's spot. What? What kind of madness is this? Anyway, I don't think we need to move Jonathan India down at all. He's got this very interesting thing right now that only 24% of the pitches that he swings at, he's actually putting in play. That's 3% below the league average hitter. Forget, league leaders and stuff like that. Plus, you combine the fact, so he's putting less pitches in play. The pitches that he puts in play, he's only got a 217 batting average against, or a batting average on that. That's why he's doing so little with his bat right now. That's why any damage he does is through a walk. He's going to add those base hits in there. I don't know what the power is going to look like, but I don't think he needs to worry about that. If he has occasional power, that's fine, but he needs to be this team's leadoff hitter, at least until June, whenever TJ Friedl can get back here, and then after that, we'll see what happens. But for right now, the performances that he is putting up, the batting average that everybody's worried about, the low slugging percentage, everything like that, it's all going to come around. He is one of those cases that 18 games does not a season make. And he's going to be just fine. Coming up, let's get a Wearfoot check-in. Reds fans, because some may perceive this sweep to have done a number on our expectations. They shouldn't. I'll tell you why coming up next. Baseball season rages on, and you don't want to miss your chance to add your favorite players from the diamond in your Prize Picks entry. Whether it's strikeouts, RBIs, or even first inning runs, take your pick of more or less and add them to your Prize Picks entry today. Get in on the excitement with Prize Picks. It's America's #1 fantasy sports app for a reason, because you can earn serious cash with all your favorite baseball player performances. We're talking 100 times your money when we talk serious cash, turning $10 into $1,000 like that. Just 4 correct picks will get the job done. You can put together a list that includes Frankie Montas strikeouts, Ellie De La Cruz steals, Spencer Steer RBIs, and you know what? Maybe even pick a Julio Rodriguez long ball. Throw Seattle friends a bone. There's so many more options out there to choose from. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match of up to $100. Again, download the app and use code LOCKEDONMLB for up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Pick more. Pick less. It's that easy. You can catch every pitch of the Reds' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM. Just download the SXM app and search the word Reds. Also, make sure to join the Locked On Reds Insiders. I've revamped the program this year. It's all about just making you a smarter Reds fan, making you that friend in your group that everybody turns to. They're like, man, what'd the Reds do today? What do you know? I want to make you that person. So text the word insider to 513-597-0944. Get a free 14-day trial. It's $4.99 a month after that, but you'll have a direct text line to me, texting all throughout the game and in between games as well. Again, that's 513-597-0944, and text the word insider. Speaking of our insiders, I was texting with a few of them today. It's been a rough day, not going to lie. Got a little emotionally involved with this series, got a little bit too deep watching some late night Reds. I might have gone a little overboard with my happiness after the Reds swept the White Sox. They are, after all, the White Sox. And I forgot a couple of things about the Mariners. Number one, they're really good at pitching. And one thing that I didn't know about them was that they watch a lot, or they force a pitcher to throw a lot of pitches. They're 4th in the major leagues. I did not know that coming into the series, they were 4th in the major leagues in making pitchers work. That is a weakness for this Reds pitching staff that they've got to overcome. They throw a lot of pitches already. If they're going to face a team that wants to force a pitcher to throw a lot of pitches, Reds are in trouble. I know a lot of teams like to do that. But how are we feeling right now, Reds fans? Look, I'm frustrated. All right? These last 2 games, and you know, it's these last 2 games, and really the 3 games, all 3 games. I thought for the most part, the final game of the Mariners series was pitched well by Andrew Abbott. Lucas Sims had a horrible day. He did not have any feel for his stuff. You could tell. He had some wild pitches, man. Some wild pitches were way outside the zone. Very uncharacteristic of Lucas Sims. But for the most part, that was a really well-played baseball game. I was just frustrated to see that the Reds lost it. But let's not lose our heads here. What I told you in the first segment, I completely 100% believe. I'm not worried. I know that we've been a bit negative, and I might have been a little bit prickly over the last few episodes, and part of it may be just because of the late night games. But I look at this team and I still say they're not far off. They haven't put it all together yet, and really that's what you need. And a couple of the Locked On Reds insiders were really helping me, talking me back off the ledge. I mean, first of all, Nate, one of our Locked On Reds insiders, he said, quote, "It's only game 18. And we've been without TJ Friedel and Matt McClain, and that means that Espinal and Fairchild have to play a lot. I'm still hopeful, but pitching needs to figure it out." I definitely agree with Nate on the last part. I agree with him on all the parts. And Josh, one of our Locked On Reds insiders, also said this: "It's still early, though. I don't want to hit the panic button right now. I still think we have the potential to be really good. We just have to remember how to consistently execute and not be complacent with the fundamentals." That's another good point. Like Jake Fraley and a couple of those. I'm not blaming Jake Fraley for not, hustling through home plate in game 2 whenever Ellie got thrown at by Julio Rodriguez. Like, Jake Fraley was just doing what every single base runner would do in that instance. He thought, I'm scoring easily. I don't think that there's a reason that the guy behind me is going to get thrown out. Not worried about that. Also, the whole, J.P. Crawford really played him really well on that stolen base, the strike him out, throw him out that Jake Fraley got thrown out at second base with. But still, those types of things, they're focus-based, right? Like, things like that feels like the Reds are a little bit behind on. They need to be a little bit better with the focused-based plays, their attention to detail, as it were. Chris, one of our Locked On Reds insiders, said, I've been emotionally invested in really bad Reds teams. This team is still fun to cheer for and hope abounds. We still have a long way to go this season. And I really jive with that because this is my 6th season doing daily Locked On Reds episodes. And quite frankly, this is absolutely the best team that they've had in those 6 seasons. I've gone through a lot of crap, to, lack of a better term, like there's been a lot of bad stuff. I mean, the 2022 season, if that season doesn't break you as a Reds fan, then nothing will. And 9-9 certainly isn't going to. It's just something like I was watching these games, and it was. I remember specifically at the end of Game 2, with the bases loaded, you got Tyler Stevenson coming up to face the lefty, a position that through his career he's well suited for, and I'm like, man, we got a shot. And I'm like leaning forward in my seat, just sitting there like, oh, please, something happened. And it just didn't. And because it didn't, it really bummed me out. That's kind of where I'm at. And that's why I wanted to do this little bit. So I hope that, I hope this kind of resonates a little bit with you. Billy, another one of our Locked On Reds insiders, said, long season, and I love them regardless. I've stuck with them through so many horrible seasons. This team is legit, and it's the absolute most fun I've ever had watching them. And Spencer also chimed in. He said, ultimately, these games didn't change much. Kirby and Gilbert are both excellent pitchers. India probably needs to be more aggressive. Some hitters got unlucky. And that was the case. I did look at that. The expected batting average for the Reds in every game but the third one was more than what it ended up being. They said that there should have been more hits, and we saw that. I mean, if you listen to the crossover that I do with Ty Gonzalez from Locked On Mariners a little bit later on today, we'll talk a bit about some of the plays that Julio Rodriguez made, some of the plays that the Mariners made as a whole. This was almost a perfect. I can't even think of an error. I mean, I think there might have been one error by Ty France, but other than that, I think this was a perfect fielding series for the Mariners. You kind of got to tip your hat to them. I know everybody hates that, but at the end of the day, I thought about this, and as prickly as I was after the first 2 games, put it into perspective. 9-9 is fine. They're not digging themselves into a crazy big hole. And stop scoreboard watching. Stop worrying about what the Pirates and the Brewers and the Cardinals and the Cubs are doing in April. You're going to lose your mind if you do that. Promise you. Just stop scoreboard watching. It's fun, and watch it passively. I'm watching it passively, but I'm not sitting here like, gosh, how did the Pirates not lose to whoever it was they were playing? Right? We're not going to get too crazy about it. I'm not losing my head over scoreboard watching in April because I know this. The talent on this Reds team abounds, and they're going to figure it out. And this is still going to be this season. I had expectations coming into this season that it's going to be the most fun I've had as a Reds podcaster and possibly the most fun I've had as a Reds fan. I still believe that that's the case, and I hope you do too. But you know what? If you don't, it's fine. I'm not here to convince you, but that's just how I feel. That's going to wrap us up for this edition of the Locked On Reds podcast. Thanks so much for checking us out and making us your first listen every single day. Every dayers. Coming up on the next Locked On Reds podcast, we're going to be live Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, getting you ready for the Angels series and how the Reds will get back over 500, baby. But until then, we're going to be Locked On Reds every single day.